Now, joining us in our Into the Wild segment this morning is a man who has spent the majority of his life observing nature through his lens and capturing it very dramatically. David Rogers is a professional wildlife and landscape photographer with more than 25 years of experience in the business and 12 books behind his name. He is also one of South Africa's most experienced photo guides and regularly takes people out on photography adventures. Today, he is going to give us some very valuable insight into the life of a nature photographer. How was that for an intro? Hey, nothing like having your life precede in 30 seconds. David, thanks so much for joining us. Your body of work is awe-inspiring, and we know we've got a lot of avid photographers out there. A lot of people, I think Instagram has birthed a whole new field of photography, and a lot of people making that leap. But I've got to ask you, you've obviously taken it a step further. You've made your life's work about this. What does it take to be a good nature photographer? Obviously, you've got to be a talented photographer, but in this realm, it's something different. What has it taken for you?
Well, firstly, good morning. It's lovely to be out in the wild. Everybody loves getting out into nature and having a way to capture that. That's everyone's dream, and many people love that. I was very fortunate to have breaks in my life, which took me. Getaway magazine was probably my biggest break. Took me through Africa at a time when South Africa was opening up to the world, and since then I've worked in Africa and been out there and learnt about it. I didn't do any formal training in photography. I had great photographers that I worked for, and it was just being enthusiastic and being involved and being out there to get there.
I think you're quite humble. I think you've got to obviously have a natural affinity to it, but if I had to talk about one attribute, possibly patience. I don't think people take on board. Sometimes you might be lucky and just get that pic in that moment, but how long does it take to get the perfect photo, to capture that moment? I mean, dude.
You've got to be out there first, and you've got to consider where you're traveling and what time you're traveling. So that's a bit of planning involved. So you've got to say, well, is it going to be what time of year? You've got to get into an area where wildlife, and then working with great guides is a huge thing, and understanding their understanding of animals and your understanding of animals. When are animals most likely to behave in a certain way? What are they most likely to do at a particular time? You kind of read them and you get a feel for it, and then developing the skill with the camera to catch the action when it happens. So there's, as you say, there's lots of time when not very much is going on.
Layers,
and you sit and people are yawning, and and you sit out there and you do it and you wait for that action.
What's the longest you've ever waited to get a pic, do you think?
Well, we frequently go out for a whole day. So we might spend 15, 16 hours a day out there waiting for something. And sometimes you come back with 2 or 3 photographs. Sometimes you come back with nothing. So it's all you have to say, well, you're not going to get things immediately. Although, having said that, there are ways to make it more effective. And I think if you're focusing on one particular thing and saying, I have to photograph a lion doing that, and you go out and you wait for it, maybe there's something else that's
missing
really...
the Gemsbok that's
exactly.
just over there.
Or maybe there's a fantastic, bit of insect predation going on that could become a great photograph.
I'm glad you mentioned the insects. I'm going to ask you about the attention to detail and what you might have noticed along the way. But I have a feeling you also become a kind of conservationist along the way. You almost have to, because that's your realm. But we've got David with us this morning, really loving having David Rogers' work as well being displayed on there. Excuse me if I keep looking away, because your photos are just breathtaking. But if you've got any questions that you'd like to pose about nature photography, especially 021 430 9881, as we take you back into the wild in a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso. Very feel-good Thursday morning. Thanks in part to this segment as we take you into the wild, and we're doing it with someone who captures the wild in the most breathtaking ways. David Rogers, landscape and animal and nature photographer. Very difficult to classify your kind of work because it covers such a broad spectrum. We've spoken a little bit about capturing these amazing moments when our animals are concerned, but you have a very unique approach when it comes to landscapes. Do you shift your thinking? Is it about capturing the animals in the landscape? Or how do you approach that side of your photographic work?
It's a good question, and something that photographers with their very long lenses often neglect is going wider with the shot. And we often say to people, shoot wide, include the rivers, include the mountains. What makes this area that you're photographing unusual and unique? And often you'll come away with a more iconic image of something, if elephant in Kilimanjaro, or a shot of Amboseli with these beautiful open plains. So that's it. So the wider lens doesn't have to be a 500 millimeter lens that shows you the eye of the animal. Those are great for action and wildlife,
Yeah.
but sometimes shooting wider is a good thing. I like
And
that.
it's an ecosystem that you're filming. To give that animal context, that's got to be a big part of the magic of the photo.
Yeah, exactly. And whether you go to Zambia with its rivers, or Namibia with its desert spaces, or Botswana or South Africa with its fantastic animals, every single place has its own feel. So to create unique pictures that show the diversity of the habitats, it's lovely to shoot a bit wider and do different things.
And I think it also shows an appreciation you have for the nature, which is amazing. I mean, there's such an emotional kind of element to that as well, which is beautiful. And I
Right.
think you clearly get into the wild to do
Yeah.
this. Is it getting more difficult to find the wild? Is the wild shrinking?
I think that emotional connection you talk about is an interesting one, because being in nature is an emotion, and that's what makes everyone's photography very different. But in terms of getting into the wild, it is more difficult. There are more people pressing into areas. Thank goodness we've got national parks and we've got protected areas that do give us the opportunity to be in a wild space. But certainly, certain of the places are becoming more pressurized, and that chance to find yourself completely alone with animals is getting harder and harder. So we'll look at, but we know sometimes if you consider what we have in South Africa in terms of the Drakensberg Mountains, we've got the Wild Coast, we've got the Kalahari. It is so easy for us as South Africans to get
We're
into the
blessed,
wild.
man, yeah.
We just have to drive over those mountains and we're in the wild.
That's in our backyard. We've got one more segment. We're going to start talking a bit about tech involved in this incredible career. Stay tuned.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
We head back into the wild one last time. As much as I've been loving taking in some of your amazing work, David, on our screens, and we have cropped a lot of those photos, just so you know, to fit into our screen dimensions. What I've loved even more is plugging into your brain. You have this incredible body of knowledge and an understanding of nature and photography, and that is evolving. And I thought quite an interesting new standpoint that we're seeing, certainly in nature photography, is that anyone can take their smartphones with these amazing cameras, these incredible filters, Instagram very much driving a part of that. You could probably take photos now on a piece of technology that might be better than what was available in high-end cameras maybe a decade ago. Is this good for photography? Is it something that's taking away from the purest side of what you do? How do you feel about that?
Absolutely great that everyone's able to now go out with their phone and take a picture, and I think the more pictures people take and the more they share on places like Instagram, the more they can develop their own profile as photographers and getting themselves out there. And I think that's something that's really happened with social media, is that anybody can present themselves to the world with their pictures. And it doesn't matter what camera you've got. You can create amazing photographs with the mobile phone. You might not get one. You've got to be clear about what you're going to go for. Go for strong graphic shapes. Go for smaller things like macros and flowers and insects. Beautiful landscapes you might not get the burst of action, or you might if you freeze frame a video. You can do a lot. So I think it's going to change really quickly. I mean, the whole compact phone market for compact camera market for photography has died. It's all about your phone and what you can do, and that is the future. Yeah.
We talk about the future in the world of drones. That future is very much here, and we spoke about earlier the discovery of a colony of 1.2 million penguins, which it brings to bear what we can do with this new technology. This has got to be good for nature, the way that we are moving with, certainly where drones are.
I would say yes and no, because obviously on a research point of view, a drone used correctly in the Antarctic or somewhere to find something is a fantastic thing, and it can promote the conservation of those areas. But we have to be very careful with drones. People have to understand the rules of how they're used. There are very strict rules about how a drone should be used.
Licenses
and
involved,
popping them up to 2 kilometers, getting into the airspace of aircraft, or flying them over animals is highly controversial and shouldn't be done. You should never fly over animals with a drone. It's going to scare animals terribly. We've seen, and they can injure themselves and cause damage to each.
Man.
So we have to be careful, and certainly no national parks, no drones in South Africa or elsewhere. Don't fly them within 10 kilometers of an airport, and you're not allowed to go within 100 meters of a person or 100 meters of a building. And those are the rules. And within sight. So young people, if you're using your drones out there, be really careful, because
be
if
conscious,
we abuse it, it's going it's going to get banned completely.
And they're going to take it away from
Yeah,
us
we
and
have to be
can
careful.
be used to incredible effect in
Yeah.
research. David, thank you so much, man. This really
Thank
has
you
been
very
an
much. It's
absolute
been great.
pleasure. We're going to put all of your details up as well, so where we can follow some of your
Yeah.
work. But your body of work is truly
And if
awe-inspiring.
people want to share pictures with me, I'd love to, interact with young people and help them get their pictures out there and give them support. I mean, teaching and photography grows, so does conservation. We love that.
Oh, I love it,
Yeah.
man. That was Into the Wild for this Thursday morning.
Thank you.